Mr. and Mrs. America, all the ships at sea. This is Ed Sheehan for Colony Confidential. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be doing this because I'm becoming an IT specialist. I might be doing a different job now. I'm really getting better at this. Anyway, Mr. and Mrs. America, welcome aboard. We're here with Frank McDonald. We're going to learn a lot. And my son, Joey, who's always informative.
Yeah, so.
And of course, there's me.
Joey Buns, Colony Confidential. Just want to welcome you back to another episode. We have Frank McDonald from Select Insurance. You may have listened to the podcast today when I mentioned Frank in regard to Disinfecting Services. So Frank, me and you have been in conversation probably for the last 6 weeks about disinfecting and doing it as an add-on service. There's like 100 questions, so let me just get your take on it, and,
okay.
And then we can continue with our questions.
Basically, when all this started, early March, I was getting phone calls, and the carriers, the pest control insurance carriers, got out in front of it and made it quite clear they wanted nothing to do with it. They were not covering it, and they would not add janitorial services onto their policies. That being said, we had a few markets for janitorial that were not excluding any virus or bacteria. Those quickly shut down. Currently, I have somebody who has COVID coverage specifically. The problem more recently, and this gets back to our conversations more recently, they didn't want any pest control in the name. They wanted a separate corporation in order to do it. So we went ahead. I had about 15 people that we did that for. They spent the time and money to start a new company. So we went to the marketplace with it to get COVID. It was a contract. It's called the Contractor's Pollution Liability Policy, which is typically coupled up with a general liability and an E&O professional liability. What that policy is really for is the guys who do lead abatement, asbestos, mold. It's an environmental type policy, and the COVID cleaning was considered biohazard, remediation. We went to the marketplace with it. We start getting kickback that they don't want to insure any new companies. So the underwriter says, why don't we just do it in the pest control name? I said, fine. So we do the pest control. I got one quote, was reasonable. And I said, all right, I need the general liability piece as well, because this is just for pollution. So what it was covering is if you had a claim of COVID infection or a claim of failure to get rid of COVID, that policy would trigger. What wasn't being covered was if you fried the servers with CSV or destroyed a carpet or a wall or blinds in the treatment, that was not being covered. So I said, all right, give me the GL piece and we'll package it up and sell it as one. The response was, oh, they don't do pest control, GL. I said, well, you told me to change it. So I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sort of I take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. I mean, at this point, it's almost dead in terms of insuring it, because the people who were insuring it, they either want you to be a full-fledged environmental company with loss runs and history, where you've done, oil tank removals and mold remediations and lead abatement and asbestos. They want those guys. So they really led me halfway down a road and then sort of closed the road. So at this point, it's difficult. My take in terms of the marketplace is it's an extraordinary risk to take on doing it, because we've seen lawsuits already, not on the sanitation side, but things surrounding sanitation. It's an easy target. I mean, if you have anybody treating public places, even apartment buildings, office buildings. I mean, if you look at the people who are working right now, they're typically financial institutions. So your hedge fund manager's in the corner office making $5 million a year. He gets COVID. Even if you had the coverage, $1 million wouldn't be enough.
So just real quick, I threw this up on live for anybody listening on Instagram Live. I want to thank everybody that tuned in. We have Frank McDonald from Select Insurance talking about insurance, of course, but the thing that's on everybody's mind right now is the disinfecting piece, if you heard what he was just saying about getting into it. So how does that work? So that guy makes $5 million a year. He's 40 years old. He could live to 80. The calculation just gets crazy, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not even a matter of punitive damages. It's all compensatory. I mean, he's got 4 kids at home and a wife who stays home. It gets dicey. I mean, it's very, very different than a failure to eradicate bed bugs. That's
Right.
an easy claim. Even if it's a lawsuit, it's an easy lawsuit.
I got a question.
What's that?
I got a question.
Sure.
So I go in and I disinfect this place or whatever it is we're going to do. And if there's a COVID virus there at the time, it dies. Now, this guy goes out or someone comes in to visit him that has it after I did my treatment. How does that make me liable?
Because you were involved in the chain of events. The allegation is going to be that you failed to eradicate, especially if there was somebody who had it before you got there. And at the end of the day, they don't have to prove anything in order for the claim to progress.
So what's coming to my mind, if we're going to do your house or your office, you got to take a test and say you don't have it. Otherwise, we can't do it. Would that help us any?
Not really, because you could be asymptomatic for a long time. Have it. Never had symptoms.
Right.
That's the variable.
However, in a court of law, I tested the guy. It showed he didn't have the COVID virus. Did that help me at all?
There's no immediate test, though. So you can test the guy. He can get it the next day. Test comes back negative, and he ends up with COVID.
Look, I think that the bottom line with all of this is, like with any lawsuit, you're not making it to court.
No.
Your insurance company is doing the risk assessment and offering money to the person that filed the claim.
Yeah.
No way.
That's how it works. They're not going to court, especially with the hedge fund guy. Their main goal is going to be to max out your insurance policy.
I mean, in that scenario with the hedge fund manager, you know, there's a high chance that the carrier is going to cut $1 million check and walk away. So anything above and beyond that is going to be on you.
See, I think that's the one thing that a lot of people don't necessarily think about is we have all this great insurance and it's these high limits, but that doesn't mean that they won't push your limits. In that case where the guy has 4 kids and a wife that stays at home in a $10 million house and blah, 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 and their monthly expenses are Y, you got to cover the Y, or they're going to look to get some of that covered from the building or the wherever you service.
Everybody involved, and then they get the PIs involved, and they find out, all right, your insurance is only $1 million, but you also own Colony Pest Management. You know what's there? You know what house do you have? I mean, what kind of car you driving? All that stuff, you know, comes into question. Technically, they don't want your money; they want the insurance company's money. But if there ain't enough to cover their expenses and their ultimate loss, it gets dangerous.
Right, 100%. So we got a question from Jay Sariggs. He said, do you see or feel the insurance industry will eventually make this service friendly for our industry? Is this logic now because this is also new?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. The problem is the carriers never had an opportunity to underwrite the risk. So the immediate knee-jerk reaction of any insurance carrier when something's new is they shy away from it, they exclude it, but they decline it. So basically, I mean, we hear different stuff every day. You know, it's in the air. Or it comes from water. It comes, you know, there's so many different variables in the actual virus itself that it's impossible to underwrite the ultimate risk of it.
It's so still evolving. Well,
exactly,
you know.
Exactly. After 9/11, it was the same thing with terrorism. It was evolving. How were we going to cover it? How were we going to look at it? And if the federal government didn't get involved and subsidize ultimate, you know, possible terrorism losses, terrorism would still be excluded across the board. But at the end of the day, when this is done evolving, if it's ever done evolving, when we know that who, what, when, where, how, you know, if there's a vaccine, what the treatment options are, all that stuff, I believe, will play into an opportunity for a carrier to dip its toes in the water a bit and say, hey, you know what, why don't we take a look at this? You know, but whether it be one of the pest control marketplaces or not, but basically a sort of a toned down contractor pollution liability and GL package that's only addressing, say, virus and bacteria for pest control companies. The possibility is there. It won't be anytime soon, but I definitely see a possibility on the horizon of a new line that could be a more permanent line for pest control. But the other question is, if this ever does pass, vaccines are out, treatments are 10 times better, are people really going to be paying to get sanitized?
Well, I mean, that's the big question. And Jay Spriggs had a follow-up question that I think you kind of answered about when we can expect to play. He understands everything, but also understanding that the money is out there to do it. And then just to piggyback on his follow-up, for those of us in the commercial industry, our clients, and you and I had this conversation, are already getting cold calls from other pest control companies that are providing the service. And that's the only reason I wanted to throw my hat in the ring.
Right.
I don't even know if we're still capable of doing it, was just to stay fighting off these larger companies that knock on my clients' doors.
Right. I mean, the best play, in that scenario that we've accommodated is lining yourself up with a subcontractor. Even if that subcontractor is another pest control company who actually has coverage. I'm not talking the people who are soliciting, but there were a good amount of people over the years who had janitorial added for whatever reason. Maybe they were doing kitchen cleanups, cleanouts. I probably got 5 or 10 of them at most that janitorial is listed on the policy.
Right.
So basically the carrier stuff. So for people calling, the first thing I do, I get about 30 calls a week about sanitation. First thing I do is look at the policy, and there are a few where I say, oh my God, you got the golden chalice. It's on there. So knock yourself out. But, if there's a claim, you won't be renewed next year. But it's difficult because everybody's losing money. It's a product line that pays well. From what I understand, the pricing is going down pretty quickly as more players are involved. There are a number of people who think they're covered and they're not. A lot of people who think that they're covered. They actually say that I have insurance, but the insurance is for pest control. It'd be different if this was hantavirus and you were applying DSV to rodent droppings on a property, attic, what have you, insulation damage, nesting areas. That's part of pest control. But when it goes to another level and now there's no pest involved, the target is coronavirus. That's a biohazard. That's bioremediation. That's like things that industrial hygienists typically handle.
So another question is, do basic janitorial or office cleaning companies have the insurance coverage?
They have the insurance because it's silent. So in other words, it's not excluded.
Right.
Cleaning janitorial services is covered with no exclusion for fungi, bacteria, or virus.
I got a question. So we hire one of these janitorial services to take care of corona, whatever, clean up. And they get sued, and their policy doesn't cover what they're being sued for. Can they back up and sue us too?
And you wouldn't be covered either. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, anybody who's doing this, any of my clients who are doing it, I have the language, Joey. I think I gave you some of the language that we want to see. I'd want a copy of their policy first and foremost to make sure that there's no exclusion sitting out there, and we're just relying on what they call silent coverage, which means it's not being excluded. Typically,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I cut you off.
The issue is because this wasn't a consideration, janitorial policies didn't exclude it. We have some that exclude virus. They're kind of tier 3 policies. They're not the type of janitorial policy that I would sell, but there are ones out there that exclude. There's one particular company that puts a communicable disease exclusion on. I mean, that takes care of everything. They can get off any claim.
Yeah.
That on that. Yeah. So, they never had a chance to consider it. So it was never looked at by underwriting. It was never thought about by underwriting. Even the SARS epidemic, the H1N1, nothing reached this level here. So it was kind of, not really thought of.
Right. We had spoke last week about that there was a policy out there with COVID-specific language.
Yep.
Has that dried up?
Yep. It dried up for our purposes. They want environmental companies with loss history.
Okay.
So by me opening up a new business, as I was instructed, I ended up shooting ourselves in the foot. So like I said, came back around and said, all right, they want to do it in the pest control name. So, all right, give me the COVID coverage for pest control. They did it, but like I said, we had no GL. It's not something that's sellable for me. You know, I'm not comfortable. I need to be in, and this, again, is outside my area of expertise. So I'm extra cautious anyway. But when things are up in the air and I can't sort of put my finger on the coverage, you know, it really scares me away.
My thought process too was, once we get out from under this New York on pause and you have people going back to the workplace, you're going to have a big need for the disinfecting piece, possibly nightly, but certainly once a week, I would think at a minimum. So I think that's what Jace Riggs is talking about, where he's saying, do we see it? You said the coverage is not necessarily open up anytime soon, but as that need becomes greater, do you see the insurance companies?
Knowing the behavior of insurance companies, they're going to need to know everything possible about this virus before anybody attempts to cover it, specifically.
So
I mean, the company that is naming it always had the coverage there. They're just throwing it out there as a sales piece. They weren't excluding it. You know, my biggest problem is getting GL. You know, and I'm constantly looking. I mean, I go through markets on this COVID like nobody's business. I mean, we're always talking and finding a new way to do it, and we may get 2 or 3 out and insured, and then it shuts down, and I got to find another path to do it. And as time goes on, there's less and less avenues. And I mean, I know I've spoken to my competitors, and we're all in the same boat. Can't get anybody to cover it, and whatever coverage we had keeps drying up.
We spoke about this briefly, but we said that there's a lot of smart people doing a lot of not smart things.
Right.
Still?
Absolutely. Yeah. More so now. I mean, times are tough, obviously, for everybody. But at the end of the day, you don't want to do something foolish and give up everything you got just to keep a couple of guys employed. And I understand that's paramount. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is keeping people employed, keeping the business going. But you know, as far as the disinfecting is concerned, I'm not sure that's the way. Well, because it's the unknown. We don't know what's going to come out of it.
Our biggest concern with that is, one, being covered properly, but 2, that's just a small piece to it, the insurance piece, right? Because then there's the OSHA piece,
PPE,
which is scarce, the training, and the documenting of training. And we know of multi-million-dollar companies. I know one that's almost definitely not insured for it. And you're talking about a $10 million company that's now generating new revenue off this. The more you do it, the more open you are to a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Could you imagine that? I'm not $10 million. I can't imagine losing my business off just trying to make, one, keeping people employed and trying to make some extra money. My only reason in trying to get into this is to stay competitive and not lose my pest control piece to the pest control people selling the COVID remediation.
And the problem is a lot of companies are getting bullied by their clients into doing it, knowing that they're not covered to do it.
Right.
And that's where the danger comes in.
Right. The only good thing for me is that our market for existing clientele is limited to those that actually need it or want it. Thankfully, in commercial, they already have cleaning people that handle it. But
even at my office, there's a step up if you want, where they'll do more. I don't know what that means, but they're there. I have part of my lease. I have people come in every night, and there is something that I could pay for, and they'll do like a bunch of wipe down. I don't know if they use the CSV or what, but I mean, I do a lot of that myself at the end of every day anyway.
Right.
But you know, I'm sure that they're more suited for it. I know like ServPro and companies like that actually have viral training. I don't know how often, but there's more to it than just, you know, splashing, you know, viricides.
If you're going to throw your hat into that ring, if you're going to throw your hat into this ring, you need to have everything in place. Insurance.
Contracts are key. Contracts are paramount.
That should be what you have before you get into it, as well as the training program. And I think that you would want to have, even if it's just you, depending on the size of your business, at least 1 to 2 people that are already trained in how to do it and know what to do and know everything about it. And the program that we've seen talks about wet times or saturation times, because DSV has to sit for 10 minutes. So you want to make sure that the thing is saturated. And then Frank just spoke about servers being fried. That's the other thing. If you're using a ULV machine to fog it, which DSV doesn't recommend that on the label, it's more recommended like a different type of spray rig. But if you're saturating, first of all, I don't know how to fuck you saturate. I don't know how you have the balls to saturate a server. I don't care what you saturate.
Wait, I already had a claim on that.
See? That's what I mean. So that's where you get, in the program, you talk about hot touch points. And that would be where you would be saturating those probably with a cloth or something a little bit different. But DSV is very specific. If DSV, and remember, everything that we say here, do not take it as the Bible or as fact.
We're not lawyers. We're just kicking it around.
The label is still the law. In the janitorial sciences industry, I don't know how that works. But DSV says if it dissipates, and this is not the exact language, but if it is not wet for 10 minutes straight, then you basically need to reapply and start the timer over.
Yeah.
That's another huge piece to it, because just a keyboard, I'm not that worried about messing up. A mouse, I'm not that worried about messing up. The monitor, I'm worried about. The computer, if they have desktops, I'm worried about where are you spraying that. So that's where it just gets.
And if you look in terms of 100,000 square feet, right? How can you possibly monitor the wet time on something that large by yourself?
That's why you need multiple people.
It's a lot to consider. I see the money, and you know me, I'm an entrepreneur. Right? You know, if I see an opportunity, I would go with it. But
but there's no sense. Kind of a different animal. There's no sense making $20,000 for 5 hours work and then having to pay out millions of dollars later on.
Right. Absolutely.
So just to give you a range of the per square footage pricing, right? Just to break the numbers down. It started at about 75 to 80 cents a square foot. Now
it's like 40 now, isn't it?
No, now it's as low as 15.
Whoa. I mean, like I said, this is like heat all over again.
Yeah.
Everybody got it. Everybody, and the price just started to plummet in order to get the work to pay for the equipment that you bought. We're seeing more and more people doing it. I'm hit up on Facebook, LinkedIn all the time. You know, companies that I insure, you know, and I'll call them up and say, hey, you know, you're not covered for that. You know, it's difficult. I mean, companies are struggling, and there's an opportunity. I mean, if I could get comfortable with a product, I put an article in PNP. If I had something solid that I felt confident about, that I knew was sellable and was covering all the parameters, and I could stack millions on it, you'd see a page article from me.
When you talk about stacking millions, you're talking about getting an umbrella, right?
Umbrella, or these types of policies will typically have a $5 million limit, all as one policy under one cover. And then if you needed more than that, then we would go outside to get more than that.
Yeah. You know, every time I talk to you, I rethink whether or not I'm going to try and do this.
How's your hair doing, Joe?
My hair is fabulous, as you can see.
I
My
see you
hair is so strong right now.
Right?
Like Samson.
Yeah.
I've broken multiple head ties this week. My hair.
Wow.
Kind of like your forehead.
Yeah. Good.
Oh, man. So look, just to speak real quickly on people losing business, like I get it. we are not immune to that either. We've lost, the business is on pause. Like we're not calling it a loss yet because they've just postponed until we're out of the dark with this. But this goes back to a saying that I was raised on, that I think hopefully after this more people will practice, and that is Ed Sheehan's favorite: live beneath your means. That says it the best. Like some of the companies that were shut down due to the mandated pause, like the health restaurant businesses. Some of the stronger ones still have us. They may have cut service, like people that were getting done weekly to twice a month, and people that were twice a month to monthly. Those are the people that had a strong cash flow, I guess, or more liquidity. We had other places that were monsters and was servicing, thousands of people a day that shut everything down and may not come back from this.
Yeah. I mean, it's once things open up too, it's going to be a matter of, who kept up their pest control, because, the stuff doesn't stop happening because we're on pause.
Oh.
So, I mean, we're looking at a potential third quarter to beat all third quarters, in the history of the U.S. economy, New York in particular. More and more companies that were out of commission in terms of getting into locations, they're getting into more locations now than they were 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Right.
I think restaurants in particular notice and understand that if they're going to reopen, they can't have mice running all over the damn place.
Right.
It needs treatment. And if you think you're going to open on the 15th of May or the 1st of June, whenever this is over, and you go into your restaurant and turn the lights on and the wall moves, you can't open. And now you got a bigger problem because you're going to need somebody there fogging the place all night. But I think smart people understand that. And like you said, went from, weekly to biweekly or, to monthly. At least there's still product being applied to keep some sort of control. And I think those are the people that will be able to turn the lights on and open.
And so it's funny, we've noticed, so the amount of garbage on the streets in Manhattan is ridiculously low. So rodent population is now seeking their meals in new places.
Right. Yeah.
And we have an apartment complex that has restaurants in the base that shut down immediately, that were known to have they had a known roach and rodent issue prior to shutting down.
Now they're coming up.
Yeah. And the building management told us to do the services, and they are going to not allow that tenant back in until they pay all of our services that they had to provide while they were away, plus back rent. So I don't think everybody's in that position, but we've gotten some restaurants in buildings that we service just because they're closed and the building wants to protect the building.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such a regional difference. I mean, I do a lot down south where everything's outside, and it's a blip on their radar. They lost a few customers who are out of work. Residential may cancel service or postpone it, but all of my phone calls are coming from New York and New England.
What about L.A., Cali?
Not really. I mean, Cali's in the same boat. A lot of lawn and ornamental, a lot of outside service. I mean, and I probably do, maybe 400 or 500 accounts in California. Nothing extraordinarily big except one who's a fumigator. So that, I mean, I don't know how impacted he is at all, really.
Those fumigation companies are a different monster.
Yeah.
That's something that when you have to do that, you have to do it. Whether it's your home or if it's commercial, it's not a matter of if or when or it's not a matter of if, it's just when and who is your provider. So
absolutely, yeah.
I know a guy out there on the West Coast that, he's had $20 million a year and $7 million years because at the end of 1 year he got an $11 million fume contract.
Yeah, Fume does that. I mean, you get a whole apartment complex, the garden apartments and whatnot. Yeah, you can run up a couple of mil in a hurry.
Yeah. What else? What are you hearing about COVID? Are you hearing anything about, I mean, you have some relationships with insurance underwriters. Are they even trying to wrap their head around it, or are they just have it?
They won't talk about it at all. I mean, I got into a huge screaming match with a fellow friend of ours who insures you and his senior management last week. And there's no convincing to even discuss it, you know, and I have my own opinions of what triggers coverage. I wouldn't take it to the bank, but you know, I have my ideas as somebody who represents the marketplace, and they have their ideas as the people who write the checks. So that's, you know, when we meet at the same place, it's a home run, you know, but rarely do we, you know, and this was the same thing when he came out, when canines came out. It was sort of the same evolution, but I don't see any evolving on this until we know everything about it.
But that's the thing, right? So you likened it to bed bugs, kind of, just how, like, as far as tracking the source of it.
Yeah.
That's the thing, because with bed bugs, with reinfestations and whatnot, there's always, you could ask somebody that has, like, for example, you do a service, you clear the service with canines, and a month later they have bed bugs again. You can't prove either way. You could say we did all the due diligence to show that it was gone, but you can't prove what have you done in the past 30 days. Or I'll even give you one better. We did a major 1.5 million square foot building. We did 1.25 million of canine inspections. We hit, in that time, we had about 10 hits throughout the building, did the service, did multiple different, you know, each part of the building wanted a different service, heat here, fumigation for some of the stuff here, chemical there. But at the end of about a 4-week process, everybody was cleared by the canines, right? 2 days after the canine clearance, they send us a picture of a bed bug and they say, "What's this?" And I'm like, "Oh, here we go." And I said, "It's a bed bug. The picture looks like a bed bug. Where was it found?" And this is the best possible situation. XYZ saw this on their shoulder on their way in today on the train. So it was the best scenario, because you tell your customer this all the time, but never does it truly happen where, this was on them on the train this morning. So it was, I mean, like, we took a deep breath with the picture, and then when he wrote back where it was from, we were able to exhale.
Right.
And what did he say? He said, "Come in and start the canines all over again," which was great for business. But that could have gone the other way. Hey, this person found it on their shoulder at their desk today.
Yep.
So I say all that to say, how can we not have a conversation with an insurance company and say, "Look, this is the same scenario. Once anybody leaves the building, all insurance all risk is out the window." No?
Well, nobody dies from bed bugs.
This is true.
That's the main concern. People don't spend 8-9 weeks on a ventilator from bed bugs. So the ultimate loss is much greater.
The larger insurance companies of the world don't know how to service you like this, because they're cookie cutter nonsense for your personal stuff. They think a $300,000 policy for somebody with a $5 million business is good enough, and that's wrong. And when you have somebody like Frank and Phyllis with Select Insurance that will tell you, this is what you should have. There's no hard sells with them. They tell you, you're at this level now, this is what you should have. You're at this level now, this is what you should have. And if any of you remember Frank's podcast with us last year, he spoke about cybersecurity. At that time, I did not have cybersecurity. And prior to his call, he said, this is something you should think about because you're in that realm now. And then that's why we brought it up during the podcast, and we signed up for cybersecurity the next day. But this is what you need. You need these type of people. They're licensed pest management professionals in various states, and they just know, they know what we're talking about. There's a relationship and a trust and a level of service that is bar none. Select Insurance is just the company that you want to be with. You know, like
You can sleep better at night. Let's leave it at that.
You're right.
Enough said.
Well said.